Okay, so we've hiked, we're hungry, we're haggard. Tuomas is losing hair over the breakdowns in his new car. But
Situation is dire.
situation's slightly dire. This is where we've hiked to, San Diego. And we, two philosopher kings, have come for a grand purpose. We're going to figure out decision theory
Want to solve it
once and for all.
or give up on the pursuit.
Yeah. Okay. Take N with Tuomas and Max. Okay, the structure. So we want to talk about decision theory. Having taken a class a year ago together by one of the semi-notable decision theorists, and we've thought about it a good amount during that semester, and we've had about a year to reflect on it. So how I think we should go about this is we can talk about our experience coming to decision theory, what we wanted from this class, what we wanted to learn from it, the things we encountered within decision theory, both the frameworks and also the problems, and then we can have a broader reflection on what we think, how we feel about decision theory now. So, yeah, Tuomas, what made you want to study decision theory in the first place?
I think you kind of convinced me to do it.
Oh, wait, it was a philosophy capstone class.
Oh yeah,
right?
it was
You
required
had to
for
take
the
it.
major.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting. It's a more mathematical branch of philosophy. Feels more familiar
But
to a technical mind.
I convinced you to take it?
I think you did. Yeah, you were
Was it-
taking it first, and then I switched from my other class into this one.
Because you could have taken another one that wasn't this one, right?
I think I kind of had to take this if I wanted to get the philosophy major also.
Oh, but you weren't convinced that
Yeah.
you were going to get a philosophy major.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I would do that, but
Okay.
yeah.
And what did I say? Do you remember?
I think you were saying that it's you think it's important for it could be important for AI safety
Yes.
and
Yes.
yeah, you were pretty convinced of the importance of decision theory.
Yeah,
at the
or at
time.
least that people who were pretty heavily influential in AI safety thought that decision theory was
Yeah.
important.
Yeah,
I think
it
I
can help
personally
us,
was convinced too. I just didn't know very much about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is stuff on Less Wrong and the rationalist writing about decision theory
Yeah.
and AI safety.
So what's the summary of that position? It's decision theory helps us.
Well, you need a correct decision theory if you want your AI to not reliably or to not act in a bad way against the desires of people or something like that.
Yeah, like a capable AI should sort of follow decision theory rules, and
Yeah.
you need to figure out how to make the decision theory work so that the AI will also work.
Yeah, and I guess I should say now that I don't feel like I understand UDT, which is their alternative.
Yeah.
So I can't dismiss that in technical detail or attack it or support it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you came to it because you had to get a philosophy capstone major, and also you were somewhat convinced it was important for AI safety. I don't think I think I took the class because it was Caspar Hare, and Caspar Hare was the one who introduced me to philosophy when I was 14.
Oh,
and
wow.
I took the class, the MIT 2400 Introduction to Philosophy, and I was really enamored, or it made me really start to think about these things a lot.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be fun.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, also, I was nearly not going to do it. It was a
Yeah.
semester that I had off while I was working
Oh,
at
yeah.
the think tank, and this was the one class I was considering doing, and I ended up deciding to do it just so that I could avoid paying health insurance.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be at MIT if I didn't take this class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was less convinced by the AI safety argument, but I thought it's like plausible. But yeah, I think you were saying that it's like a fun, good class.
Mm-hmm.
I was
and it's
intellectually interested.
And that it would be fun for us to do together.
Yeah.
Which it was.
It was a good time.
Yeah. I also think that there's something about decision theory. The thing that drew me to decision theory is also in common with the thing that drew me to other philosophies or philosophy classes, strands of philosophical thought.
Yeah.
Which was, I wanted to know the right way to decide or to act.
Yeah, just
I
like
wanted
on a
a
personal,
system.
yeah.
Yeah, I wanted
level.
a system that could tell me how to be. And decision theory is kind of the ultimate promise of that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, maybe if I understood decision theory, so I was really good at academic decision theory, then I could make the best decisions in my life.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting stance to have.
Yeah. So it seems like sort of the almost the grand promise of decision theory is like it can really tell you sort of how to live your life. And like also like, but not just you, it's like a system. You can apply it for an AI and like it would also do.
Well, it doesn't tell you precisely how to live your life, but almost like given that you have some inclinations, or you're able to establish utilities for certain options, then it can tell you the best process for going about it.
Yeah. Like there's like room for like what are you optimizing for, but like given that it's supposed to sort of tell you how to do it.
Yeah. So I mean that is like the early, if we go back to the beginnings of decision theory, I think it comes about when von Neumann and Morgenstern start modeling an agent, and they propose that how you could make a rational decision is pretty straightforward. You just have a number of options, like A, B, and C, and you assign values to each of the options, and then you multiply those by the probability of the options, and then you choose kind of this probability weighted utility. You choose the highest probability weighted utility.
Yeah.
And this was
expected value.
Yeah, this is what expected value is, right? And first, it's most obvious in like casino-like contexts.
Yeah.
When you're playing probability games with coin flips and cards.
You have a clear probabilities and like clear prices, like it's money or usually money.
And I think what they were doing was, I actually don't know from the outset if it was both normative and prescriptive. This is one distinction you can make about the different types of decision theory. One is claiming about how you should act, and one is trying to describe how people actually act. I think it's much more normative from the beginning.
I think so, yeah. I think I haven't really seen many people claim that people actually maximize expected utility.
Yeah, so it's like the ideal rational agent, this is how they're supposed to behave.
Yeah, like this is how you should behave.
And so it begins with just probabilities. So okay, this is like, we've talked about why we wanted to do decision theory. We can talk a little bit about the substance of it. It begins with probability weighted, just like expected utility. But then this runs into some problems that are pointed out by people like Laura Buchak. I mean, actually, there are even paradoxes early on, before von Neumann and Morgenstern, like the St. Petersburg paradox. Remember that?
What was that one?
That was proposed, I think it was in 1880, some mathematician was, it was about if you flip coins and you keep doubling the reward. It was like an infinite paradox, one of the infinite paradoxes. If you keep doubling, God, what is the St. Petersburg paradox? Wait, can you look it up quickly?
Sure.
I think it's
I think it like you end up like choosing like a practically zero chance of like infinite gain over like any like a guaranteed chance of like any amount of money.
Mm-hmm. But so this is one of many different.
Oh no, St. Petersburg is like playing a lottery where like.
Oh, it's like you keep betting.
No, I think it's like you have this like game where like it's like where's the you get paid by like whatever is the number of the first heads or something. Like so you keep flipping a coin until you get heads.
Right.
And then the amount you get paid is like 2 to the number of like flips it took to get there. And then it's like there's a 1/2 chance you just get paid off like 2.
Right.
And there's a 1/4 chance you get paid off 4. 1/8 chance you get paid 8.
Right.
And so on. And the expected value
Is infinite.
of this coin flip game is infinite.
Right.
So you choose the option to play this game over any finite amount of money that's guaranteed for you.
Right.
Even though like most of the times you end up with like a payoff of 2 or something.
Yeah. So and the question's like that also applies like if you've done the game, if you've flipped the coin and you have $2 and then you have the option of keeping what you've gotten or continuing to play the game.
Yeah.
So like say you got super lucky and you flipped it and heads came up the 5th time. So you would get.
Let's not say 5th time. Let's say it came out the 100th time.
Yeah. Say it comes out the 100th time. So you get 2 to the 100.
Yeah.
Which is like how big is that? That
2
is.
to the 10 is 1,000. So that would be like 1,000 to the 10th power.
1,000 to the 10th power, which is.
I don't think we have it's like some weird word.
1,000 to the 10th power of. Anyways, it's like 10 to the 100 something. Oh yeah, so it's 10 to the 3 times.
10 to 15. Oh no, 10 to 30.
10 to the 30.
Yeah.
So you have 10 to the $30, and then you're given the option. You can have that.
Yeah,
or you
play
can
again.
keep playing this St. Petersburg, and according to expected utility, you would keep playing it, right?
Yeah. Or at least the expected value.
Expected value.
Yeah, because it's like.
Right, because the
sort of
value
a differentiation between, right?
That's very important. Yeah, utility is something that gets latched on. That someone like you have your subjective utility that gets given to each option.
Yeah.
But for value, it's for the money game. It's clear, at least if you're willing to talk about what's the like money maximizing strategy.
Yeah. So I think it's like sort of the start of decision theory is kind of like before that there was the tradition of like probability estimation and like sort of gambling theory of like what you should do to like maximize your payoffs or whatever.
Right.
And that's where like expected value came from.
Yes. And then the moment you start talking about utility, that is the beginning of decision theory.
Yeah. So you replace the abstract number or like amount of dollars with the utility function that describes like how good is this for you.
Right.
And then we get in the frame of decision theory.
Yeah, how you can deal with I mean, would you say that decision theory is under a form of utilitarianism? Basically, everything we encountered was.
Yeah, I think
utilities.
at least the like popular approaches that we know of.
Yeah.
Are like heavily rely on utilitarianism, but I don't know what's the actual definition. Like maybe there's like other competing that are like quite different style of decision theory.
No, I think that's it. I can come up with a counterexample now already.
Yeah.
When we were talking about other decision theoretic, like voting rules.
Yeah.
There's the board account. Oh, you've got a phone call? Okay, we can pause.
Hello? Give me a sec.
Okay, back on track. Decision theory. We were talking about the history of it and utility being assigned. Yeah, what made it decision theory was that there was utility that got added, and then people thought you can weight the decisions according to the utility that's given to you. And then I came with a counterexample, the board account. There are other decision theoretic frameworks that to mark the transition. There are other decision theoretic frameworks that don't use utility, that are more like voting schemes. And so there's some overlap between social choice theory, which is the theory of votes, and decision theory. So yeah, the board account, for example, you just rank all of your choices and you give the number of votes according to the rank, and then you sum them. And that doesn't require any conception.
But how do you rank them?
Well, you don't...
based on different attributes, or
like
what is most desirable for this thing?
Yeah, so for example, if we're trying to decide whether to eat a hamburger, a salad, or a soup, you rank them 1, 2, and 3. So if in general you want to be healthiest, maybe you put salad and then soup and then hamburger.
Yeah.
And there's
no voting here, right?
Yeah.
Or like summing.
If you already rank them, then that's kind of the decision.
You have the choice.
Wait, what is this board account for?
Outsourcing the decision. Isn't that like, that's more like a moral uncertainty thing, right?
Yeah.
You have like different.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some overlap, but that's only when people start. So that was Will McAskill's actually invention.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Will McAskill's thing is normative uncertainty, where he starts to introduce that we can draw on parallels with voting theory and decision theory. So we can use things like the border rule or Condorcet winners, that type of language, to talk about what you should do under normative uncertainty in different moral theories. But yeah, actually maybe explicitly choosing usually does depend on utility. I don't know. Let's see what else is on this.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the first things we get taught in this class is that this whole problem of the St. Petersburg paradox can potentially be resolved by what this woman at UC Berkeley, Laura Buchak, calls risk-adjusted expected utility.
Yeah.
And she says you can have another function that you put in that's just the risk function. This option, you can have a risk function that's greater than 0. Like there's greater than 1 or less than 1 if you're more risk seeking or less seeking, and that effectively lets you get rid of this St. Petersburg paradox.
Yeah.
Which like the Petersburg paradox, I mean, like the extension of it is that you value the money, like the money's equivalent to utility, basically.
Yeah. I mean, there's like other like more like standard approaches to get rid of the paradox, right? Like in
economics.
Like the usual way is to have a non-linear utility function. It's like maybe it's like the square root of the amount of money you have or something like that.
Right. But the reason that she introduces this, I think, is because those problems themselves, or those solutions themselves, have problems.
Yeah, there's still some problems. Yeah. But
In fact, she says that for any... Didn't she say that for any, like, utility function you can find some example that...
Yeah, sort of like similar.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyways, so that is one attempt. One thing that I thought about is that in the course of this class was that there are... Actually, maybe we can, before we go into the problems, do we remember any of the other interesting approaches? Okay, I don't really remember other, like, decision theoretic proposals besides Laura Buchak's one.
Yeah.
It was just like the rest of the ones were just like papers about why these have
like
problems.
Yeah. And that was also a pretty problematic proposal in itself.
Yeah, the Buchak proposal.
Yeah.
So yeah, you came up with the idea, but then we ended up writing the paper together with a concrete example of why Laura Buchak's risk-adjusted expected utility doesn't work, and it was to do with time.
Yeah, it's like a time series. It's like, because the way she weights like probabilities, it like depends on like when you calculate the what do you consider to be the different events. It's like if you have a one gamble where there's like if you bet on the outcome of two coin flips on a single gamble,
right,
then you will make a different choice than if you first bet on the outcome of the first coin flip and then bet on the outcome of the second coin flip.
Right.
Even though like even if all the payoffs are the same and the probabilities are the same in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a weird thing, which is if you give someone a bundled bet, they act very differently than if you unbundled it and you gave it to them. Even though the bundling is really just they do one decision and then the next decision.
Yeah. Like the bundling really isn't like it doesn't change the real world situation at all. It's just how we model it.
Right.
Which seems inherently flawed to me.
Yeah, so that's a problem with consistency in time. And I mean, Laura Buchak talks about it later in her book, but still this is kind of the beginning of a like maybe this is not as clear as we thought. You can just like have a decision theory that works for all these things. For general decisions.
What are the other flaws that were
problems with precision? The other one that's cool is that I like are the two papers that we read. One is Professor Hare, Caspar Hare's own paper, and the other is Ruth Chang's. And the first one, Caspar Hare's paper, is about your house is burning down, and there are firefighters who come in, and the firefighters have to save one item. So you know that there's your wedding album, which contains all these really precious memories with you and your wife, and that's really important to you. But then you also know that there's this Fabergé egg, which is a really rare, it's like a very rich person thing, given by Tsar Alexander the Second or something, or Tsar Nicholas the Second.
Yeah.
And is just this family heirloom that's worth a lot of money. And he says at this point, it's like he cannot say which one you should save, right? And the whole thing is he cannot say which one you should save. And even if you sweeten the deal by saying there's $100 next to the wedding album, that doesn't make a difference. He still can't make an all things considered a choice.
It's like the base point is like there are things that like you can't say which one is better, and it doesn't mean that they have the same value, because if you add $100 to one, you still can't say which one is better.
Right.
Instead, there's like something else going on there.
Yeah. Because you can imagine another silly example. It's like you have your son Tim and your daughter Lila, and you can only feed one of them or take one of you, in the apocalypse, and you say, I can't make this decision, and then you say, well, like Tim has $1 in his pocket, you know?
Oh yeah.
Or Tim has $100 in his pocket.
Yeah, therefore you should.
And so you just take, and it's like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So what that pointed out, I don't remember the exact conclusion that Caspar takes, that Professor Hare takes, but it's something like deciding a good decision theory has to somehow take that into account, and like maybe it's just in general really hard to make precise distinctions about choices.
Yeah, I think it was kind of in support of like the on par theory, right?
Right. And so that naturally leads us to the next. This is a solution. This is a proposed solution by Ruth Chang.
Yeah.
Which is that in this case, you cannot use relations like the three relations which underlie decision theory, just like greater than, less than, and equal to.
Yeah, I guess kind of deeper thing behind this is like the assumption going from like probability theory to decision theory is that like you have some sort of utility function that like given any state it can give you a number that describes how good it is.
Right.
And normal numbers just have these three relations, either one number is greater than, smaller than, or equal to the other. But it seems like these values don't follow these three rules.
Yes. And so what Ruth Chang says is we need another relation, which is called on a par.
Yeah.
The thing is, the wedding album and the Fabergé egg are not equal. They're actually on a par, which means that it's not also. So she is careful to say that it's not that they can't be compared, and it's also not that they're equal. It's that there's this new thing called on a par, and then she starts to describe some of the relations about it, which I don't fully remember.
Yeah.
But was it a satisfying answer to you?
I think it's like it seems like they're onto something, but it kind of like if we accept that, it almost like breaks down decision theory itself, I feel like. Because now you like operating with things that are on a par, it's just like all of these rules just kind of stop making sense, like. Right,
and how are you supposed to decide when things are on a par?
Yeah, it's like,
so
how do you know?
I think this starts to get at one of the bigger problems of decision theory, which is that there are like meta-rational considerations. Like how do you decide things like how much utility to assign to something?
Yeah.
Or whether something is on a par or actually equal. And you need like another decision theory for that, right?
Yeah.
And like that, and it just like infinitely builds on itself.
When you say things like on a par, then like you also run into some sort of like paradoxical situations of like, you know, a Fabergé egg and a wedding album are on a par, and if the wedding album has $100, it's on a par. If it has $200, it's still on a par. But like at some point, if you keep adding $100 every time, you're probably not on a par anymore. Like maybe it's a wedding album and $1 billion, then like you're just gonna choose that.
Yeah. It's like a wedding album and like the embryo that will become your future son.
Yeah.
Or like the embryo at 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so what's... Sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, that would get... Yeah, I don't know if it's like a different kinds of things. I was just thinking like, if the Fabergé egg is like mostly monetary value, and like if you add value up to the Fabergé egg, then it kind of becomes clear because you're like sort of like, you're winning on all the fronts. It's like it's more money and it's more emotional value. And maybe but yeah, I think precisely defining this kind of on-par notion is very hard.
Well, the on-a-par notion itself is an attempt to move out of precise.
Yeah, was that the attempt? Maybe it's like, we shouldn't. But I feel like, if I remember correctly, I think the author was like trying to frame it as like, you don't have to change the framework too much. You just kind of include this extra relation and things still work.
Yeah.
Which I think, doesn't really work actually.
Yeah, so my feeling about it is that she is trying to build on a conceptual system that is fundamentally limited. It's like a boat that is sinking and she's trying to bail the water out. Like the solution is not to just patch on another relation. It's to realize that you cannot use decision theory for like these types of things.
Have to give up on the both.
Yeah. But that's jumping ahead of our current stance on decision theory. The other problems that we were introduced to, this is only like the second of the problems, right? The other things that we were introduced to were problems of infinities.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, we talked about that with the St. Petersburg paradox, but there's also another, there's a crazy paper by Bostrom.
Yeah.
Do you remember like any of the details about that?
I think I remember the kind of broad idea. I think it's like, it kind of shows that like these issues we have when we approach infinity are actually like much broader than you would think. Just like it's more than just the St. Petersburg paradox. It's essentially like if we think there's like any chance of like an infinite moral value or like infinite utility in some possible world, which we probably should assign some non-zero probability to. Essentially every decision has the same value. Like we can't make any decisions at all. It's like should I pay $50 or should I get $50? It actually doesn't matter because like your expected value is like $50 plus 0.0001 times infinity, or negative $50 plus 0.01 times infinity, and those are the same. So if there is if there's any chance of an infinite payoff, then like nothing else matters. Like we're basically paralyzed. Decision theory doesn't tell us how to act in any situation.
And this is kind of paralleled with the problem of moral fanaticism.
I think it was like part of the paper maybe.
Because this is something that reappears in normative uncertainty, is that there might be really weird beliefs that assign infinite values or incredibly high values to certain things, and those would just dominate everything else.
Which is very dangerous because that could like easily justify you doing like very horrific acts. In the name of some much greater good. There might even be just a small probability of it.
But before we go to the like meta decision theory, the normative decision theory stuff, we're still at the level of basic decision theory. This is like we're not done with the problems with it, right? Another problem is determinism. And that really comes up when we talk about Newcomb and Newcomb's paradox and the smoking lesion and the two-box problem, right? And the whole thing is that if you start to introduce notions about predicting how the agent's going to act into the decision, things get really weird quick, right? Like the two-box or the Newcomb paradoxes, where there is a room and inside like one box, like box A, there is $1,000 or some notable prize, and then inside box B does it matter if it's larger or smaller?
It has to be larger. It's like
so it's like 5,000. Yeah, it's like $5,000 or something. And you can either choose box B or like the bigger prize, or both of them. But the thing is, there's a really good predictor who like observes your past behavior and will choose to put nothing in both boxes if they predict that you will take. Or
they'll put nothing in the bigger box.
Okay.
If you're gonna take both, if they think you're gonna take both.
Right.
But the smaller box will always have the $1,000.
So it's like $1 million in big box, and then
Yeah.
in this small box it's like $1,000.
Yeah, so either you could choose to take the $1 million
right
box, but which also might have $0 on it, or you could choose to take the $1 million or $0 box plus the $1,000.
Yeah, and then so evidential decision theory is so the two approaches are like, one is causal decision theory, one is evidential decision theory. And evidential decision theory is when you two box, right? One of them is like,
I think it's the other way, maybe. I'm not sure, actually.
I thought causal decision theory was one boxing. One is like you pay attention to the causes and you think about like what the predictor is likely to do, and then one is like you pay more attention to like past evidence.
I think causal is like...
oh, you're right, actually.
Yeah, causal is like you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Either the predictor... Because the key is the predictor puts the money in there before you make your decision.
Yep.
So it's like you're like, if their money was put into the box, it's better for you to choose both boxes.
Yeah.
Because you will get $1 million and 1,000.
Right.
But if the money wasn't put into the box, it's better for you to still choose both boxes.
Right.
Because you get $1,000 instead of 0.
Right.
So it's like, in either state of the world, it's better to choose both boxes.
Right.
So clearly, causally...
That's causal.
I think that's causal, yeah. But I'm not 100%.
Oh, okay. I did not think it was. In either case, the names don't particularly matter.
Yeah, names doesn't really matter.
But yeah, it just gets, you can go down this big rabbit hole, and then there's versions of this problem, like the smoking lesion problem. It's like your friend, you know that there's some link between having a brain lesion and wanting to smoke, and like given that your friend smokes, like should you be happy for them about that, or like I don't think we have to go into the specific details, but suffice to say that there's some genuinely hard it's like not even simple trade-offs to make. It's just like the whole framework just gets kind of like perplexed.
Yeah, I think the decisions get very confusing once you get into a situation where there is like some factor that's like correlated with your decisions.
Yeah.
Like with your like sort of future decisions are correlated with some previous factor, like the predictor's performance. Like if the predictor is better than chance, then sort of like the prediction already is like correlated with the decision you are going to make.
Right.
Which perhaps implies some sort of lack of free will, or like at least a problem in this framework of like where you assume that like independent of other things you can freely choose this decision.
So it's like decision theory is implicitly built on this notion of like decoupled causes or free will, right?
Yeah.
But if you take a deterministic lens and you start to set up these questions that assume a more deterministic way of acting, then it violates some of the core assumptions.
Yeah, I think it violates.
Theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen a good way to like reconcile that with this deterministic view.
Well, maybe UDT, the like Yudkowsky's thing. People talk about that.
Yeah.
Or FDT. There's also functional decision theory.
But, yeah.
But I mean, it's unclear. Like, and in either case, those are maybe promising. We haven't looked at them, but in general, I think like even if it did somehow save this problem of determinism, there's all these other problems. There's the problem of infinities. There's the problem of precision, like how precisely you can specify things.
I feel like the problem of precision is more like the problem of like comparability.
Right. Or I mean, it's like precise or. Okay, sure. Like it doesn't really matter what we call it, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's like, but yeah, it's connected. Of like maybe you can't compare with precision, or like you can't compare at all. Or
and there's another problem too, actually. Remember the options paper?
Oh yeah, like how do you know what are your options?
Yeah. So Caspar Hare's grad student has this paper called "What Are Your Accessible Options," where he tries to argue about. Like, when you're in a given situation, how do you even decide what the options are? Because most of these toy problems give you the options. But, like, in reality, if you're walking down a trail or you're about to get in your car, there are so many different, there's like infinite different options.
Yeah.
And how do you bracket those into different things? And he says, like, I can't remember his exact solution. It was like, your options are the things that you can reasonably do, or that like appear in your mind, or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's not quite that dumb, but basically, I think this is like a really serious problem, because you put two different people in the same situation, and they can respond in incredibly different ways.
Yeah.
They have different ways of seeing that are not enumerable.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, why is this a problem? It's
a problem because, okay, here we can go back a little bit to what a decision theory is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite things from Laura Buchek, is that she says clearly a good decision theory should be action guiding, evaluatable, and predictive / explainable. So it should be able to tell you what you should do in a situation.
Yeah.
It should allow you to evaluate whether you made the right decision and assign blame if you didn't, and kind of be able to explain decisions of other actors to see if they're like rational or not. So actually the explainable part seems like it's overlapping with the evaluating, but those two criteria, action guiding and evaluatable, I think are solid. That's what I would expect from a good decision theory. So the reason that this matters, that options matter, is if it is to be at all action guiding, if you're put in the situation, like, you should know what options you want to go through.
Yeah. And it like the basic framework is like you enumerate through all the options, calculate their value, and like see what's the best one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's kind of part of the meta problem. I feel like it's like similar to like how do you assign like the utility function.
Right.
It's like how do you know what the options are.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's been the problem of infinities. That's one. Second is this problem of what you call comparability or precision.
Yeah.
And then the third is problems of determinism. And then there's problems with like consistency in time too. That there were the original problems with Laura Buchek's.
Yeah, I think that's like Buchek's specific proposal though. Most decision theories don't really have that problem. But yeah, I think it's like, and then there's the meta level problems of like.
Yeah, and then there's meta level problems, which are pretty serious.
Yeah, I think that might be the more bad problem. Really, is like how do you assign utilities? How do you assign a number?
Yeah, how do you assign
a real world thing?
Yeah, how do you assign utilities? How do you even decide when to use your decision theory?
Yeah, when should you apply it?
And yeah, what are your options? So, like, and then I guess briefly to go through the attempted solutions, like Ruth Chang proposes the on a par thing, and then Will McAskill kind of has an attempt to make a meta decision theory that brings in ideas from social choice, saying like you can actually just treat each. Well, he does this in the case of moral theories. Like, what do we do when we're not sure how we should act, and we think there's some possibility that utilitarianism is right or deontology is right, And so he says what you can do is you allow them to basically vote or have their own utility theories or utility functions that assign different options values.
That doesn't really work with decision theory, though, right?
What do you mean it doesn't work with decision theory?
Or does it?
This is like a decision.
Oh yeah, this is how you make the decision.
This is a decision theory for choosing among moral.
No, but this
theories.
Is how you choose which option is better, right?
Yes.
But what if there's a probability involved? Like
of what?
Like. Oh, I guess the probability is like part of the outcome. It's like you have an outcome, like this action leads to
mean,
this sort of probabilistic future state.
I mean, that might depend on that might be an input to the moral function. You know, like, for example, like deontologists might think that any probability of this is really bad, whereas utilitarians might be like, oh, it depends on the probability.
Yeah, I think you put in the probabilities into and then you have this probabilistic state, and then you calculate for a specific theory.
Right.
How to do it. And you have those both between each other.
Yeah. And so he has this whole machinery that's trying to be a decision theory for moral decision making. That's like, there's a credence function, there is like a state space, and it's kind of like an RL setup almost.
Yeah.
But
I think this framework suffers especially badly about the problem with options, though, right?
Yes.
Because you're ranking the different options and how fine-grained your like option space is.
Yeah.
Or like which options you consider like can affect a lot, even though like perhaps your best option was already included, but like how many other options you consider may change the outcome.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of jumped the gun a bit, but what Will McGaskill proposes in his thesis, at least, is that you can use this thing called the board account, where you rank things, and according to each theory. So if it's like eating a salad versus eating a steak versus eating soup, if like a utilitarian thinks that it's really bad to eat the soup, really bad to eat the steak, but fine to eat the soup and salad, and I don't know, like a hedonic utilitarian is like hedonic human-dependent utilitarian is like you should eat the steak because it's the tastiest or something. Like, how you adjudicate is you get the typical utilitarian to rank the options, like 1, 2, and 3, and then the human hedonic utilitarian to rank the options, and then you can like sum the votes. But what you were just saying was that is really dependent on how many options you have. Just by adding additional kind of inconsequential options, you can change the outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
So all of these proposed solutions we looked at were kind of deeply flawed. And it doesn't really seem like there's hope for a decision theory that could in principle do what we want, of like telling us what to do in any given situation.
Yeah. The overall feeling is that like there's many quite severe problems exist for decision theory, and none of the proposed solutions really seem like satisfactory. Like they raise their own issues. So I guess that kind of brings the question of like, is this the style of decision theory that's just doomed? Like maybe we're just like sort of the first principles are like off, or is it just like we're just not smart enough and there's like a better way to formulate these things that gets rid of most of the problems?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that we're not smart enough. And I don't think this means decision theory is useless. How I think about it now is that decision theory, like probability theory, is a tool that is really useful in certain domains. And what we've done by bringing it into these normative contexts is we've taken the tool out of its useful domain and it's breaking down.
We're like trying to use a tool on like a much broader set of issues that it was really designed for.
Right. Yeah.
Even though decision theory does, like, sort of from the start, it was kind of like ambitious.
Right. But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that maybe the tool itself was like probability theory.
Yeah, like probability theory is like,
Like, let's use that for, statistical mechanics or like making decisions in a casino. All of these things, like probability theory is great for. But once you start to talk about like human preferences. That I think is the mistake.
Yeah, you're overextending the use of the tool.
Yeah. And so the problem of like what you should actually do in a given situation is like what Chapman would also call, or what he would call a meta-rational problem. And for that you have to, there is not like in principle a system you can build, a theoretical system you can build that can tell you what to do. You have to start to move into more improvisation, things like relying on reasonableness over explicit rationality, which decision theory is within the domain of. There's also the discussion of rationality we have in the class, which is really cool, because I hadn't thought that explicitly about what it meant to be rational.
Yeah, what is rational?
And so I was using it basically just to mean good or right.
Yeah.
Like you Tomas, you won't drink this water that had a cockroach in it even if it's been filtered. That's irrational.
Yeah, and that's like implies it's like something wrong to do.
Yeah, it's just like something. Yeah, and I think that's colloquially how it's.
Yeah, I think that's how it's often used. But yeah, I think people are very confused about the concept.
Yeah. And so there's a really good paper by this Russian dude. I mean, it's actually not a good paper at all. It's a horrible paper where he spends 100 pages in like excruciating, dense writing trying to figure out what it could mean to be rational on its own grounds. Like what rational, free of depending on some kind of given utility function. Like without a utility function, could it make sense to say something is rational or isn't rational? And then he kind of goes back and he's like, actually, there's nothing that you can really rely on. So it doesn't make sense to say something is rational or not unless you have a very specific function or aim you're evaluating against.
Yeah, it has to be like with respect to something.
Yeah, and that's my current stance on it. It's like, I will only say rational if you have something close in precision to like a pretty clear goal, and a clear benchmark by which you're evaluating it. So like I would say it's not rational like if you care about having as much money as possible in your life, then it's not rational to buy lottery tickets. And like if that is the main aim, then it's not rational. But I would never say like it's irrational to buy lottery tickets.
Yeah, that's just
which is this is how
behavioral
that's how economists talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
People are irrational, like all this stuff.
Yeah. I think it's really like
so annoying. Now that we've read these papers.
Yeah, it's like people assign this power to this like simple function they came up with, like your utility is the number of money you have or whatever.
Right.
And then they assume that's the truth, and whatever doesn't follow this truth is irrational.
Right.
There's like a lot of implied kind of wrong reasoning there, I think.
Dude, so the implications of decision theory being flawed like this are actually really big, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, mainly I'm thinking of behavioral economics. A lot of, at least Kahneman and like 90s, 2000s behavioral economists, I think even today, are still trying to bring in utility functions and talk about people as agents. And they're not claiming that people are rational agents anymore, if they ever really did that. But they are really taking seriously this notion that decisions should be guided by a decision theory.
Yeah, and money is like approximation of utility, or like...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that behavioral economists...
Yeah, maybe not.
Behavioral economists subscribe to that so much. But, yeah. Though, like, I don't know. I think in practice there's a really big variation within behavioral economics papers. Some people don't take this very seriously. Some people seem to. And I probably shouldn't be, like, lumping them all together like this. But decision theory has affected a huge amount of stuff. Like, computer science, too. Right? Like, all of RL is basically an extension of decision theory. Right?
I think it's It's sort of like a decision theoretic framework where RL works, yeah. But I think
it's like 1,000% a decision theoretic framework. Right?
But I think the thing is like, I don't think it's wrong in that framework, right?
It's not wrong in that framework because we are operating in game-like scenarios.
Yeah, like decision theory does have its use cases. Like if you're trying to like figure out like what's the best strategy to like maximize your score in a video game, then I think decision theory is probably the right tool to use. Like you have a limited number of options. It's not clear what they are.
Right. It's
clear what's the target function.
Right.
And outcomes are comparable to each other.
Right.
But it is kind of interesting though, it's like as reinforcement learning tries to like move from like more clear game like things into more realistic settings, is this kind of basic framework gonna cause problems?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I mean, in principle, I think it has to. Because if you're going to say, what's the reinforcement learning agent going to do as Tuomas in Tuomas's life to maximize his utility, like, or to maximize Tuomas's like joy or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're going a little too far here. Like, we're not trying to, like, replacing a person with a reinforcement learning agent is, I think, pretty far out. But like, if you think of like some intermediary things, like,
well, I was trying to just do the most extreme example of the most subjective thing to point out why or the type of problem that it might suffer.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, I guess that comes to the same thing of like, there's tools for things and there's like the right scope of using those tools. Like reinforcement learning is a tool, but I think if the goal is to figure out like what makes me the most joy, like I don't think reinforcement learning is the tool for that.
Because there's no reward function.
Yeah, like the reward function is not clear. And the other thing is like, for reinforcement learning to work, you have to be able to like try things many times. Like you explore an action, you see what's the reward, and then you try a different action.
Right.
But like in real life, things only go forward. You can't like, okay, let's restart and play this again. Like that's not an option. So it will require maybe some like fundamentally different approaches. I don't know, even you're starting to see like sort of robotics or something like self-driving cars, like they don't really use like the classic reinforcement learning that much.
Right.
It's more like imitation learning. Like there's hard-coded like pipelines of how you act, but you just like you only use like neural networks for a specific part of the job, but then like actually have a rule-based system that tells you how to take actions.
You mean you only use rule-based systems or explicit RL for a specific part, but you use neural nets on other parts? Because neural nets don't suffer from the problem.
Yeah, neural nets, no, but like if you're talking like specific like self-driving cars, like sort of like a big like grand ambition of reinforcement learning would just be like, you know, end-to-end RL to like given inputs of the environment, figure out what's the best action to take to drive safely.
Right.
But like that doesn't seem like the best approach to go. Perhaps partially because like, you know, we don't really know the reward function, and there's also like other problems with the learning. But instead it's like what people kind of use to get around that is like they have a neural network to do vision, and then you have this whole beautiful map of like your environment, but then you just have a rule-based system that tells you, given this is how you should drive. But yeah, I think let's not get too far into this tangent.
Yeah. So what else do we have to say about decision theory?
I think
sorry, go on.
I'd like to get back to that point of like, if you think it's like a tool that's applied too far, like sort of this whole probabilistic mathematical analysis for making decisions, like what are I guess the limitations are that like when it's hard to specify what's your reward, and like it seems like there are cases where like there doesn't exist a function, like it's just impossible to make a function, and that kind of seems like a case where it shouldn't be applied. It's like, but suppose like we agree that the tools of like sort of utilitarian probabilistic analysis don't really work well for decision theory.
Right.
Is there like something else that could achieve the aims of decision theory? Like, how should we think about decisions? Is there any systematic way that is useful?
I don't think so. I think that the mistake is to try to make something universalized like that. I think that decisions are like heavily contingent on the nature of the activity that you make. Like if you're improvising a jazz piano solo versus if you're trying to make a career decision.
Yeah.
Versus if you're trying to choose whether or not to break up with your girlfriend.
Yeah, you just should not make the same type of calculation, or like maybe there isn't this. Maybe it's not the same thing.
What do you mean it's not the
like
same thing?
Maybe the whole phrase decision is somehow
wrong. This is kind of what this is something that I have begun to feel more and more.
Yeah.
So it started when the emotional disillusionment with decision theory began when I tried to explicitly apply it to my life. Make decisions about very emotional things, relationship decisions, and seeing that it just was not adequate, or I couldn't make it work. It was just very unsatisfying. And then now, me going into much more intuitive mode, it's like I'm not even making decisions. Just things arise and then they just unfold, and then I go along and do them. Good. You know, it doesn't feel like I'm making a bunch of decisions. Maybe a decision theoreticist would come to me and say, "You are making decisions. You're making like, you know, thousands of decisions a day, or like, you know, many decisions a day."
Yeah.
But I guess I think I would say that it does not, like, under that definition of decision, there's like infinite decisions that are made all the time. Like, what about the decision to blink your eye or something? You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's like there's an impulse that arises and then you can just follow it. Like going on a road trip, and it doesn't have to be like a cognition, like a reflective decision thing, you know?
Yeah, like you just do things like.
And that's a more free way of being.
yeah, maybe you shouldn't like. Cause in a way, like this whole frame of like there's certain decisions, and like it like sort of splits life into like, now is the time to make a decision. Right. Now is the time to follow through with the decision. Now you stop and like you make another decision.
Right.
Whereas like, you know, there is no break. It's like you're always making decisions, or
you're never making.
Or you're never making them decisions. Yeah. And you know, if we believe the world is deterministic, then like decision is not any different from like a rock falling down a hill.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of try to elide or not too closely consider like problems of determinism.
Yeah.
I think it makes things like very tricky.
Yeah.
But yeah, one thing that this does make me think of is that decision theory is a subset of thinking more generally, or thinking and cognition.
Yeah.
And thinking isn't good for everything in your life. In fact, it's good for a small subset of things. It's good for when you have explicit problems.
Yeah.
And you know, problems aren't things that exist out there, but they're more of like a way of seeing things. But so insofar as you're willing to see this thing as a problem, and it's useful to see it as a problem, then you should think about it. And if you're thinking about it, then a good tool within thinking, like while you're thinking about it, could be decision theory. But your life is not, at least I wouldn't want my life to be considered a series of problems to solve.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It's like a... Yeah. Yeah, like even the like... It just comes back to sort of like... Yeah, also a critique of like utilitarianism and stuff. It's like this sort of series of problems is just like a very sort of like optimizing framework of life.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just thinking like, oh, I'm trying to find the optimal strategy to make the best utility out of my life.
Right.
And like that's how I should, make all my choices. And like maybe it's just like, yeah, it feels too rigid, too mathematical, and it's sort of like maybe if we said it that way, it just like just by thinking about it that way, you sort of lose something.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe life could be something more like magical, mysterious, free, and like this sort of mathematical analysis doesn't really like.
It doesn't allow you to live in that way, but
yeah.
But it also can destroy that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Right?
Is like it kind of directly takes that away.
Yeah, it's not just this is how I feel. It's like it's not just that it leads you to behave in certain ways that might not make you happy.
Yeah.
It actually can lead you to construct your environment in ways that conform with your decision theory.
Yeah.
And like perpetuate this like type of rigid worldview. Like and this is hard to precisely talk about, but I'm imagining someone like they think they've got their utility function figured out. So they have like a stable house in a suburb and like a nice suburb of Boston or something.
Yeah.
And they set up all these things because they know like it gives them this amount of utility.
Yeah.
And they're just like very much like, this is the way that my life has to be because this is the way that is optimal.
Yeah.
And then the world inevitably changes, and they're like I am not in an optimal like I am in not an equilibrium, like I'm suffering, and they suffer.
Yeah, yeah. It's like this pursuit of optimum just causes you pain.
I think there's a double-edged sword here. One is you don't know what optimum is.
Yeah.
And the other is that the very strong pursuit of it leads you to hurt yourself or to cause pain.
Yeah, and I think like
yourself pain.
Yeah, yeah. And even if it's not a very strong pursuit, I think like this sort of framing might just like take away some of the joy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And excitement.
But I mean, thinking about problems can be fun too.
That's
like,
true.
We're thinking about the problem of decision theory.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're just doing it for fun,
yeah.
I do feel like it's like, I'm just in a way like afraid of like having my life too figured out. Like if I were to find the true utility function, then it just kind of feels boring when you're like just trying to optimize for this target. Like it's not.
I mean, I think
how it should be.
Yeah, well, it is boring, and it's also, I think, like incoherent to think that there's a true utility function.
Yeah.
Like a true utility function for who? For you now? For you in 10 years?
Yeah, like that's going to change. And also like, a lot of decision theory also assumes that your utility function is fixed.
For an agent.
Yeah, but I don't think that's true at all. And the problem is like it doesn't just like vary along time in like a predictable way. What is like the actions you take change your future utility function.
Right.
And I think that breaks the whole thing actually.
Yeah.
How do you account for varying utility function? Should you take the actions that make you have a utility function that like is the easiest to?
Yeah. I mean, people talk about this, the vampire problem, It's like it's silly to think of a vampire problem, but maybe it's the problem of having kids. You know, like should you have kids is a typical quandary people have.
Yeah.
And the whole problem is that people who have kids from the outside look like they're miserable, but you ask them and they're like, actually, this is so meaningful. And
like this is,
And they're like, if they hadn't had kids, they would think that their decision was like, it's like basically in both ways you think that the other person is worse off. So if you don't have kids, you're like, wow, I'm glad I'm not suffering like that. And then because your like quote unquote utility function is more similar, but when you do have kids, like your quote unquote utility function changes and you start to like really enjoy what looks like suffering.
Yeah, like you value different things because you have kids.
Right. You deeply change as a result.
Yeah.
And so how are you supposed to evaluate that when it's like a different being in the future, you know?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question.
A lot of problems with this issue.
Yeah, it's falling apart here.
Yeah.
So what do you say? How should you live your lives? It's like, should you even think of things in terms of decisions? I think there's like certain situations where there are decisions. Like in certain cases it makes sense. Like you sort of have options and like it determines some part of your life. Like where should you go to school or I don't know. Like it seems like some things are more decisional or like clearly like decision-like, and maybe you should like analyze them a little more rigorously.
Yeah. So I think definitely systems are helpful. Decision theory is a potentially helpful system. I don't think I would ever try to put explicit utility on things, but I would try to write out different scenarios when I'm trying to think about what school I should go to.
Yeah.
It was like between Columbia and MIT, and I never wrote it down explicitly, but I was thinking about this in my head, what it would mean to go to one over the other. What would that imply about my future, what skills I would gain. And I did kind of have a pro and con list. And I think that is in general a very useful thing to do. So my feeling is that it's very, very helpful to have skill and training in technical formal tools. So learn it, like deeply learn it, be able to apply it, and then kind of forget about it. And don't try to use it as a framework for your life. But allow it to come up if it is appropriate in the situation, because your whole body, your mind and your body is very, very good at understanding context and drawing up the useful thing to do there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the more game-like the scenario, the more clearly helpful it is to use decision theory.
Yeah, like you can make... I think the main issue is like... it's really not that much decision theory, it's just like the idea of utility functions. And like, if you don't have a utility function, then like decision theory can't really tell you how to do anything.
Yeah, too bad we don't have utility functions.
Yeah.
But it is useful to think of it as though we do in certain situations, like financial accounting. Trying to calculate net present value between two projects. That is a certain decision theory that I think is really helpful. Because you don't particularly care if you're building a power plant in like Kenya or like Zimbabwe or something. Like it doesn't materially. I mean, maybe you might care for other reasons, or maybe you should care, but and in these in a situation like that?
Yeah, I think it's like the more removed it is from like kind of personal things,
right,
and like feelings and less kind of detailed knowledge you have on it, then like maybe the more useful it is. Like, like if you're thinking about money, then like it's a pretty good framework.
right,
Or like if you're if you're a leader making decisions over a large population,
yeah,
then you could just kind of estimate that like certain things are good, like people's lives have like equal value or something, and like that could be a rough utility function that kind of can guide your decisions.
yeah,
but yeah, when it comes to like personal decisions, or like decisions where there's like many factors that kind of like can't be compared with each other, I think it's sort of a hopeless pursuit to try to use decision theory. And maybe there just isn't a right way to make those choices.
Yeah, I mean, a right way would imply
like there's some
function.
essentially like
yeah,
like rational. So maybe there's like there's no wrong or right choice to be made.
I mean, it's.
But sometimes you can make wrong choices, right?
Yeah. You can make wrong choices, but I don't.
Yeah. Maybe a lot of the choices are on par, but some are not.
You're still thinking like a decision theoreticist trying to patch it. Right.
I don't know. I think it's like kind of my maybe how I would live my life is like thinking about something like this. Like you could like list down sort of like your expected consequences for different actions, and then you just get like a gut feeling of like, how do I feel about the total of all this versus the total of all that?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time you can be like, this sum seems better to me than this thing. But sometimes you're like, well, this is different. I don't really know.
Okay, I think this concludes our discussion on decision theory.
On the top of the mountain.
On the top of the mountain in San Diego.
Yes.
Good conversation.